Hello everyone, welcome to Bisexual Education. I have written down notes because otherwise I won't remember anything. I also have STEM toys with me because otherwise I'm not going to be able to focus on anything. The aim of this panel is to discuss the state of queer sex education right now and how bisexuality, I hope I can say that word, bisexuality is and should be incorporated into the sex education space. Queer sex ed is often overlooked, it's criticised, and we want to have a conversation about how this affects the bi community, why we deserve better, and what we can do to initiate change. Before we get started, in fact, even before the panel introduce themselves, I'm going to give some content warnings for things which might come up in this discussion. We want to give a content warning starting for sex. We're going to be talking about sex education, and that might involve us talking about sex. We think that transphobia, homophobia, biphobia all might come up. Racism, mentions of sexual assault and sex work in the adult industry. We're also going to be touching on sex ed we received as young people and our experience of that, so all of those things except happening to our younger selves, which is a thing which we decided we also wanted to give a specific trigger warning for. Did I say sexual assault? If I didn't say sexual assault, and also the use of the F slur in a reclaimed slur type way. I realise we should have done the introduction before this, sorry. I am Quinn Rhodes. I am a journalist, freelance sex writer, and professional transsexual, and my aim is to change the conversation we have around sex and intimacy and gender. And I do that through writing about reproductive justice, blowjobs, polyamory, all of those good things. Not usually in the same article. We need to give it a visual description of ourselves. So I am a white trans man wearing a white Queer Palestine t-shirt and purple shorts. I'm wearing glasses and have shaved brown hair, and I'm holding a squishy pig stim toy. Leanne, you go.
Okay, hi everyone. Is this working? Yes,
yeah.
Perfect. My name's Leanne Yau. My pronouns are she, they, and I am better known online as Polyphilia. I make content under the handle Polyphilia blog on most platforms on social media, mainly around polyamory and non-monogamy, but also sex positivity, queerness, neurodivergence, and just drawing from my own experiences as a polyamorous, bisexual, womanish of color. And I'm also training to become a sex therapist. That's me. But down the line, should we go Hugo actually? Because Hugo's
Hugo's in the middle.
Your face is right between so you go, Hugo.
Yeah. Do you guys hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you good.
Good. So my name is Hugo Vaillancourt. I'm joining you guys from Canada. I'm from Montreal and Quebec, so I'm not in the UK. I'm polysexual and bisexual, and I write a series that's called Sex Ed for Bi Guys. And I'm also the co-founder of r/bisexual men, which is a message board on Reddit. And and this is mainly the sort of stuff that I'm swimming in.
I'm Joni. I'm a sex worker, actor, writer, and I've been working as an actor for a long time. I've been doing sex work not as long, but a couple of years. And then, what else do I say? I mean...
Describe what you're...
Oh, yes, of course. So,
you'd forgotten that.
Yes. Red hair, white t-shirt, baggy jeans, white trainers, woman.
I'll also do a visual description. I'm Asian. I have kind of long dark hair and dark eyes. I am currently wearing a black t-shirt which has the text "Not Your Third" in the bisexual flag colors, and I also have a very lovely long skirt that is also in the colors of the bisexual flag. Hugo, would you like to do a visual description?
Yeah, I'm a middle-aged cis guy with a shaved head and a salt and pepper beard, and I'm wearing a lovely artwork T-shirt of a wolf with bisexual colored flames in its mouth, who says, "I will not apologize for my nature." And I also have my trusty fidget spinner. And I'm wearing a hoodie, and that's about it.
Hi there, I'm Emma Chan. So I work for the School of Sexuality Education, which is a charity which delivers inclusive relationships and sex education. And I'll be using the term like RSE, which is what that stands for, probably quite a lot. I'm also like my kind of core profession is I'm a doctor. I work in mental health. And that's kind of the sort of crossover between sort of health and education is where I kind of got into RSE. So I work, in terms of RSE, I work mainly in schools with kind of in secondary schools with young people, working around the kind of statutory RSE curriculum. My pronouns are they, them. I am a fat, mixed race Chinese and white person. I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt, green, sort of greeny dungarees, and thick glasses.
Excellent. And I also realised I didn't say my pronouns, which is strange because I say them all the time. My pronouns are he and him. So we're going to do a light question to warm up, and we're going to talk about how we define sex as a bisexual person. So what does sex, what does sex look like for you? Or not look like. I'm not asking you to describe your sex life. I'm asking you sort of how do you define sex when it is not just
Every Thursday and Saturday.
Do you want to go, Joni?
I mean, what is the music of the spheres? I don't know. It's like, I mean, for me, sex with, I see it as sex with people first and foremost, but then in terms of like, I feel there is a slight difference between sex with people who identify as men and people who identify as women. There is, and there's shades of grey in between that. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, as a bisexual person, it's all one, really. I personally don't care.
That's a good answer.
I'll say. I guess like my relationship to sex has evolved quite a lot since kind of coming out as bi about like, I don't know, 6 years ago now. And I think these days I actually think less about sex and I think more about pleasure. And what kind of experiences bring me pleasure, because that's such like a more kind of broad umbrella, and also, you know, sometimes I can have experiences that are technically sexual but not necessarily pleasurable, and also vice versa. I would say, yeah, like, you know, kind of sex to me is honestly like things that bring kind of intimacy and connection and also pleasure. And they honestly don't even necessarily have to involve like genitals. Like, you know, once I like had a very kind of connecting experience with a partner of mine, where like honestly all we did was just give each other like massages. And you know, like at the end of the evening, he was like, "Oh, like, you know, like I feel like it would have been nice, like if like we'd had sex this evening. I was looking forward to that." And I was like, "You know what? I feel like we did." You know, and you know, like that was. Like
that's
a really
part
interesting
of it as well, isn't it? It's like where do you draw the line of what is not sexual and what is? You know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
When does it tip over into that?
Exactly, and as you know, like I'm training like as a sex educator as well, and like, you know, the more I learn about sex, the more I realize that there are, you know, yeah, like there's a lot of kind of blurred lines. You know, like one of my partners is a sex worker, and you know, like we were just talking about like sex we'd had recently, and she was like, "Oh, like I haven't had sex with men in years," and I was like, "Don't you like in work?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, well apart from like last week, I guess, but that doesn't really count." And so, you know, like even with things like that, like I think it's very individual, I suppose. And yeah, like I think what feels good mainly to, you know, your body or your soul. Yeah.
Do you want to go, Emma?
Yeah, so this is a really great question, and it's something that we actually do in sort of sex ed lessons a lot. And I kind of like, I completely agree with the kind of things that you said, like particularly this idea of like focusing on pleasure. So we would focus on feelings, and the kind of the definition we give is it's anything that makes you feel like horny or aroused, and that can be like touching, that can be with on your own, that can be like it's about the like sex as an experience. It's about the feelings. It's not about like specific things. Sex ed, even if you're trying to push the narrative, the kind of sex ed that you're taught to deliver, you're told that you have to deliver in schools, is very heteronormative, kind of heteronormative, and also just like really focuses on like reproductive PIV sex, and it's so we kind of do sort of define that and really focus on those kind of like feelings. Really interestingly, there'll often be pushback against that amongst young people, which I don't think is necessarily coming from them, but more like coming from like wider like kind of narratives about like what counts as sex, and this idea of well, no, I can't possibly have had sex if I've just like masturbated, or I've never had like a sexual experience with another person, or if I have but that hasn't included like penetration. Like you get some very like there's a lot of discomfort in the room and a lot of like pushback, I think, often, and we kind of have to sit with that quite a lot of the time, I think, because it's I just find it really interesting because like who cares if like your definition of sex is different from someone else's? Like why does that matter? But that is definitely something that is kind of like present in kind of like, I think, broader narratives.
Yeah. Hugo, you go.
Yeah, I actually, this takes me back to when I was facilitating sex ed workshops in secondary schools. We would also start these conversations with what is sex and see what the room brought, and also maybe challenge some things. But also to surf a little bit on what you were saying, Emma, because I think sex is some kind of wavelength through which you either connect with other people or with yourself. It's not exactly about the specific acts, but more like a vibes thing. And I think I just want to point out that sex isn't just with other people. It's something that you do, that most people do with themselves way before you have any sex partners of any kind. It includes masturbation, fantasy, and your relationship with moments of desire and moments of erotic pleasure. And I bring this up because a lot of the time in research that touches on bisexual people and bi plus people, the only sexual experiences that matter are the ones that happen with partners. And that dismisses a whole set of the sexual experiences of bisexual people that happen way before anyone has any partner of any kind. For a lot of queer people, sex can be a source of great shame and guilt, and it takes a particular flavor with bi plus men and boys, because for like teenage boys and for men, sex with cisgender women is supposed to be one of the ways that you confirm your masculinity, and how queer your sex ends up being flies in the face of that. But once you heal from that, it can also become a great source of liberation, fulfillment, and connection. And often in ways that monosexual people, whether straight or gay, are not going to experience. And this can be subversive too. Like, for example, sometimes I feel like I'm at most queer when I'm having sex with a woman, because we're having a man-woman relationship that doesn't follow the rules of heteronormativity. And that can be a blueprint for a new world in which those relationships fall outside of that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm also now thinking about my definition of sex and how the things which make me feel most affirmed in my masculinity are probably not what make most cis men feel most affirmed in their masculinity. I won't go any further into that, but yeah, that's interesting. We're now going to talk about our experiences of sex ed in school. I personally disassociated through most of the sex ed I got at school, so there may have been some. I remember looking at photos of STIs and what that could do to genitals, which is not an effective way of teaching about STIs or safer sex. But I don't remember anything else. So what were your experiences like? Do we want to start with Emma this time and then come back down?
Perfect. So I went to a all girls school, like a state school in North London, and overwhelmingly, I think this was a gendered message. I suspect it was different in like a boys' school down the road. Like overwhelmingly, the sex ed was don't get pregnant. Like that's the point of sex. Don't get pregnant. Which. Yeah, so I guess like you could characterize it as kind of like inadequate, sort of like also like very much speaking to a really specific. So this is like, as a healthcare like worker, no one really talks to you about like reproduction, sex after school. There's no like statutory like program or education. So like that kind of message, not only that kind of revolves around like reproductive sex and not getting pregnant, like not only is it like not really helpful to that that individual but that you're trying to speak to, that kind of, but also like at some point some people might want to get pregnant, and it's just a really kind of narrow limited like version. It also just like really takes away the idea of sex as kind of something that should be is about like pleasure, enjoyment, like human connection, like all of those kind of like really human experiences, and puts it in a very like clinical kind of term of don't get pregnant. So I guess within that format it was okay. Like we got like a pamphlet, we went through a lot of like, it was very information heavy. It's like, here are all the different types of contraception, which is actually something that as a sex educator, like within our organisation, we do have like disagreements about how we should do things, but I kind of push quite a lot that we shouldn't be like information heavy, because if you're going to have contraception, you're probably going to talk to someone else about it, get that from somewhere else, right? So it's about like the kind of like wider like principles and discussions, and it's really important that we create an awareness around contraception, but like memorizing all the different types of contraception, which is what I did as a kind of teenager in school, is just not helpful. I think also like I appreciate the question was about like what our education was like, but I think sadly, like I think in some spaces it hasn't actually moved on a lot. I think some schools have like there are places that are doing like amazing work, and schools that are doing work, and there are like charities like us and other organisations that do loads of like challenge that kind of narrative. But I think there is also a lot of the kind of experience I have still going on.
Yeah, I think my high school probably has not moved on a huge amount from what I got when I was there. Not much I remember it, so.
I mean, the contraception that I got taught about was condom, and that was it, really. I mean, there wasn't anything about, like, you know, IUDs or anything really. No, not that I remember. No, state school as well. Yeah. I don't really remember anything about that.
I think that's a really interesting point. Like, so as a clinician, so I've worked in gynae health as well, and like reproductive health, and like I think often, like it's not just that we sort of focus on like contraception and we don't even talk about like so we would make like in the practice that I do we would make a distinction between contraception and protection, so things that prevent against STIs and things that prevent against pregnancies. But within school spaces, often you see like it's not just that they're focused on information, but they're focused on the information that they think young people should have, so that there's a real unwillingness to talk about like certain types of contraception because we don't think that's what young people need themselves. Do you just, sorry, this is me now asking a question I haven't prepared, but do you talk about PrEP? We do, yes. We talk about protection. We try and have like separate conversations within the same workshop about protection and contraception. We will talk about PrEP. That's really interesting. That is one of the things we get pushback from teachers in the room sometimes.
I have thoughts which I will talk to you about after this panel. Hugo, do you have any thoughts on this? About your experience?
And just as an aside on PrEP, there's actually big gaps in knowledge for like heterosexual people on PrEP, and a lot of people would actually need it. So that's that's something that's really associated with the lives of more queer people and men more specifically, and that gets overlooked. My own like experiences with school sex ed happened in the 90s, and what's a bit special is that I actually got better sex ed than people here who are younger than me, because it got cut from the school program in the early 2000s.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, what I didn't get was only half decent. It was, it was about the biology, the plumbing, and don't get pregnant, don't get a girl pregnant, we were calling them STDs back in the days, don't get an STD, don't get AIDS. But we're also talking about condoms and contraception and how like to prevent these outcomes. But we did not talk about like queer people or queer stuff in sex ed where I was in the 90s. So there was nothing in there that I was in the mindset that, well, I have no reason to think I'm anything other than heterosexual. And there was nothing in there that would have given me a cue that, well, maybe your experience is not quite like that of most of the other people in there. And neither as a queer young person or as a bisexual boy, like there's no way that our experiences were acknowledged in there. And I was lucky that at age 15, I found a book at the library that was men talking about their first sexual experience.
Ooh.
And one of these experiences was a quite loving experience between two guys. So I was lucky that I had a chance on there. That was kind of my first cue that, oh, this is a lot nicer than I expected this was going to be. And I kind of like that. And but that definitely did not come from school. And the only thing that got me set on the path to figure out that maybe I was straight was when I was 17, I got the internet at home, and I ended up on a bisexual chat room on IRC, and I started talking with people and realized that, oh, this is all really relatable, and maybe I'm not like a heterosexual. But that definitely did not come from school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Leanne? Sorry, you were going, and I'm.
No, that's okay. So context is that like I grew up in Hong Kong, and so yeah, I got like bulk of my sex education there, and I've been in the UK since I was 16, so I had a little bit of sex education in sixth form as well. And I would say echoing what a lot of others on the panel have already said, like a lot of kind of fear mongering and kind of stuff that was like practical but also not practical at the same time. Like I learned about all the different types of contraception, and that gave me the confidence to go and like get the implant or whatever when I felt ready to have sex when I was like 16 or 17, I think. But then also we were taught about condoms, but not how to handle a conversation if someone doesn't want to use a condom and you do. So a lot of things that like don't really equip you, I suppose, to have sex like in practice, or to kind of navigate those conversations or to unpack the shame around sex. And obviously, not a lot about queer sex either. I probably, like most bi people, was like terrified to have sex with someone of the same sex for ages, because I just didn't know where to start and what to do or like what it looked like and whatever. I probably got most of my sex education like just online, like reading fan fiction for my sins, and Googling, some of it's helped, some of it was misguided. Largely, though, like I think I got to explore kind of kinks and things and desires like that, through just online communities and fandoms and things, and that's probably been more helpful to like my kind of sexual development and discovery, I suppose. But yeah, definitely like echoing a lot of what others have said here. Like a lot of it hasn't moved on, and needs to change.
And we have such a historic issue with it in the UK. I mean, like, I can't remember the name of that book, but there was that little girl who had two dads. I can't remember the name of that book.
Jenny lives with Eric and somebody else. Martin.
Eric and Martin.
Thank you.
And like the way that was just bashed by the powers that be, and we just keep having instances of that. And it's like, so like we talk about books of the library, but I mean like the book, they were completely removed from the library with Clause 28 and everything. So like it's a big thing. Like in terms of bisexual. Understanding of bisexuality in regards to like the technical aspects of it, just any kind of education in general. I mean, like condom was the only thing that it was really. I remember two instances of it, like at age 10, like when I was like in year 5 or something, in year 9 as well. I was 14 or whatever, and it was just the same. It was condom, and that was it, and don't get bloody pregnant.
And I think the way that condoms are definitely in the UK have discussed, it's very much like the pressure is very much put on the person who is receiving sex a lot of the time. And that also, as a bi person, I'm like, I could very much be doing both even in the same evening with the same person, but like throughout my sex life, definitely being both in both of those roles. We're going to talk about next is the myth of the slutty bisexual. So I know Leanne has feelings about this. Would you like to go first?
So there is the stereotype that bisexuals are kind of promiscuous untrustworthy, cheaters, etc. Like, and in my work, I talk a lot about that, especially because this is like all of those stereotypes are also applied to non-monogamous people, and it's no accident that there's like a huge intersection between both those communities, but that's possibly beyond the scope of this panel. But anyway. Like I think, as a polyamorous bisexual person, like I have seen kind of some discourse online about how people like bisexuals who do embrace their sluttiness, who do embrace I guess non-normative expressions of sex or whatever, wherever that looks like kink or threesomes or whatever, are doing a disservice to the bisexual community, because we're trying to move away from these stereotypes of people are going to see us as sluts and you're making us look bad. And the thing is, like, these stereotypes don't come from individual bisexuals. Like, these stereotypes come from biphobia, come from biphobic people imposing them on us. And it's not my business if these traits that I happen to have, kind of are in line with kind of some misconceptions people have about like a group that I happen to be a part of. Like, it's purely coincidence. There are bisexual people who aren't slutty. There are bisexual people on the ace spectrum. There's across the whole sexual spectrum. And so, yeah, I'm someone who very much kind of has reclaimed the word slut. I was called a slut even before I was having sex. And, that was because some people discovered the fan fiction I was writing when I was 15, but hey-ho. But yeah, people were calling me that word even before I actually had any sexual experience. And, now I would say I have a pretty great sex life. I do workshops on threesomes at festivals and things. It's great. But I also talk a lot about biphobia and how bisexuality, especially in the kind of non-monogamous spaces, sex-positive spaces, is very much fetishized, particularly if you're a bisexual femme. It's a different story for bisexual men and masculine presenting people. And, I talk a lot about how fetishization is not the same thing as acceptance. I'm wearing this t-shirt that says not your third, because bisexual people, in sexual situations, are often, reduced to sexual objects, sexual fulfillment for the male gaze or for just, the pleasure of a couple or whatever. And, I really want to empower bisexual people to reclaim their voice in those sexual situations, especially if you're dealing with an established couple, for instance, and kind of how to navigate how your sexuality is being perceived and how to kind of navigate the being perceived by the male gaze, or what's the difference between fetishization and acceptance, and various icky situations that can come up. So the slutty bisexual stereotype is it's not our fault. It's very much the confusion. The confusion comes from people being like, oh, if you're into everyone, then that means you must be into me specifically, or or you're confused and you're trying everything. You'll try everything, and it's not that, we're not greedy, we're not selfish. We just happen to be attracted to multiple genders at once, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes not, and that's fine. We should just be allowed to exist, sluttily or not. Thank you.
I'm going to go to you, Hugo, and I don't know if you had an answer for this prepared, but you were talking about bisexual men as vectors for HIV, and I'd love if you could talk more about that in relation to slutty bisexuality.
To start, I would say the true uncensored version of Sex Ed for Bi Guys as sexually explicit photos of people having sex, because it's intended to be a celebration of the sexuality of bi plus men and a bi plus person who identify with masculinity. In my own personal life, I justify the stereotype. I've never been non-monogamous, and I have a lot of friends that I have sex with also. So I justify all the stereotypes. And I believe in reclaiming, like Leanne said, in reclaiming sluthood as a concept. But it's still a damaging stereotype because it enables sexual violence by plus people of all genders, women and non-binary and trans folks especially. But still, the stats on childhood sexual abuse that bisexual men experience as boys are horrifying, and they're even worse than those for gay men, who are awful in their own right. They're like, no, but they're like, this is fucked up. Like, this is. But also, the slutty bisexual plays into the idea of bisexual men bringing HIV to straight women, especially the idea that they're doing it by cheating on their spouse or their girlfriend. So that's a stereotype that feeds all of that, and it really dehumanizes bisexual men in that regard, because we only matter as like vectors for HIV. Like, people are going to contaminate straight women. And whatever we're experiencing ourselves in this doesn't matter in that equation. It also feeds this image that you need to be sexually active to count as a bisexual, and to specifically have been sexually active with people of multiple genders. While you could never have had a sex partner in your entire life, you can still be bisexual, pansexual, polysexual, and you don't need to have had a partner for this to be like valid about your experience, because your experience of your desires and your fantasies by yourself matters. And also, it kind of feels, the slutty bisexual stereotype kind of feels the idea that bisexuals can't be fulfilled unless they get both women and men. When like a lot of times this is not the case, and the people are seeking like a monogamous relationship because that's where the emotional stability is at. But it always comes this idea that, oh well, you need like both to be fulfilled. And here I'm saying both because non-binary people and people of genders other than cis men and women are usually not counted in that whole like biphobic thing going on.
Yeah.
So I'd say that the slutty bisexual stereotype is a denigration of sex and bisexuality rather than a celebration of it, which reclaiming sluthood or having celebratory images and depictions of bisexuality can do.
Yeah. Joni, what do you think?
Did you mention, Hugo, about the idea of, obviously you mentioned about women and non-binary people, trans people experiencing it more to be called a slut than cisgender men and that's what did you mention about that?
No, I didn't mention that, but that's true. And people are perceived as female usually get called sluts, and people are perceived as male usually get called the F.
Well, that's what I was going to mention about the fact that it's femme-presenting people that I think that suffer the main brunt of it, to be honest. Femme-presenting people, in that it's such a product of misogyny, in that that's kind of it, really. I think the idea, the notion of sluttiness, it drives from the idea that, from my perspective of it, my understanding of it through what I've lived through, men, if you're a man who's in any way interested in other men, then you are categorically gay. And if you are a woman, I'm thinking in very binary terms here, but if you are a woman, because of the nature of women's sex being much more based in the emotion and love and the romance and that kind of thing, or just being an object for the sake of sex with no emotions whatsoever, the detachment. I think my understanding of it when I was younger was that bisexuality was more acceptable for women. But then with that means that they will if they are bisexual, then of course to legitimize it you have to have loads of sex. So the stereotype is based on the idea of like, well, in order for it to be true, then it needs to be happening a lot. That therefore is sluthood,
Yeah.
It's very prescriptive.
Yeah.
And I'm very clear that I'm not disagreeing with what you said there, but I do think it is definitely, when we're talking about male and female in those terms, very much what people perceive and
Yes.
what like people put themselves like. I have still been getting like catcalled until quite recently, and I'm like, obviously not a woman, but still have boobs. It's great fun. And I think definitely had a point, it's gone. Do you have clever things to say, Emma?
I'm not sure about clever.
Give it a go.
So I completely hear and agree with what people have said about the kind of slightly bisexual being like a harmful stereotype, about it being like rooted in often misogyny or transphobia, and about it being coming from biphobia particularly. So I agree with that. And also my kind of instinctive thing, I think you asked, like, how do we feel about that stereotype? My instinctive feelings are to be very defensive about and protective of this slutty bisexual that may or may not exist in actual fact. Because I think that kind of, when we say it's coming from like a place of biphobia, it's trying to sort of like shame people and sort of say like you should behave in a certain way, and this is what we think it is, and sort of like police someone's behaviour in that way. So yeah, I feel very defensive for this figure that I kind of like maybe recognise, but don't that doesn't feel like me, or I question the validity of. But like I also like I overwhelmingly want to go like, so what? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just want to say to Joni's point as well, like about kind of female bisexuality being more accepted, like, like in some ways yes, but other ways no, right? Like, fetishization versus acceptance. And also, like while bisexual women are kind of fetishized, eroticized, admired, consumed, at the same time they're also being denied the validity of their sexuality. And so, they are visible and invisible at the same time.
Maybe to add something to that, the research on the negative attitudes that queer people face consistently shows that bisexual men face more negative attitudes than bisexual women, lesbians, and even gay men. And one of the likely reasons is the consequence of the AIDS crisis and the whole fear of HIV. And this ties this whole idea of bisexual men being hypersexualized and having sex beyond like the female partner's back and bringing back HIV. That's definitely, I think, one of the things that's behind that perception.
I am baffled, not by you, but by the fact that we seem to have entirely ignored that it's not just men who can get HIV.
Well, was it in 2005 that there were more straight people with HIV
now
than there were with gay people?
Yeah. Or certainly more new diagnoses of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I love that we're getting heckled with accurate directions.
More.
Okay, so we should be moving on to the Q&A pretty much right now. So I'm going to ask everyone to keep their answers to one thing. So, what one thing would you like to change about how sex education is taught in schools? We have 1 minute to do this, so I'm looking for your top line answers. If I'm going to go first to give you all a minute to think, and I'm going to say, I brought it up already, but PrEP, there is a medication which is, if taken correctly, is 99% effective in preventing HIV transmission, and most people, most people who are not gay or bi men do not know that they maybe should be on, gay or bi cis men don't know that they should maybe be on it. It will be helpful. This is a drug which we didn't have 20 years ago. It's really incredible, and the fact that it is not part of the sex ed curriculum is astonishing and deeply disappointing to me. Leanne, I'm coming to you next.
Yeah, just one line being like, I think it should be more pleasure focused. Just like empowering people to have positive experience, because there's so much like shame and also like fear like around having sex and pressure to have sex, especially for young people. And so I think the more you can empower young people to make good choices, to to feel really ready to have sex rather than like just because they feel like they should at a certain point in time or because their partner told them to or whatever. I think young people would live kind of better lives for it. Like, so sex that is like pleasure focused and is empowering and where people are encouraged to be engaged and that's
Perfect.
what I'd say. Yeah.
Hugo, what do you think?
Yeah. You ask a bisexual to choose just one thing. There's a reason why we need comprehensive sex ed, because everything that's been brought up is important. What I've chosen is not what I think the one most important thing, but I've chosen the thing that I wanted to highlight is that school sex ed should say that bisexual boys exist. Mm-hmm. Here's what it's like to be a bisexual boy, what it feels like, what that looks like, and that you're valued, you matter, and there's going to be people who will love and care for you and support you.
Yes, definitely. And I definitely think too, there's definitely a unique experience for bisexual boys, but definitely also bisexual people of all genders definitely included in that. Joni, what's your...
I will second that about bisexual boys exist. I mean, like, that's the reason why I know what I mentioned before, is because when I was growing up, there weren't any bisexual boys that I knew that weren't very quiet about it, or at least, in certain circles. But the main thing, I think we should be focusing more on porn consumption and how actually, and our exposure to it, and young people's exposure to it. Not encouraging it, just to talk about it and start a conversation about it. Dare I say it, when we are younger, maybe in key stage 2, like primary kind of education as well, because I remember the first time I ever watched porn was 9 years old.
Yeah. The average age, I think, is 11 now.
Yeah,
Like that.
yeah. And everybody's got an iPad, everyone's got an iPhone, like everyone's got access to the internet. It's all there and it's available. And, you can just go on a friend's Wi-Fi if you need to.
Yeah.
Like, I think we need to start having the conversation a lot earlier. I think we need to have the courage to do that.
That's a really good one.
So I think the one thing that we need to do to make kind of bisex better is to be really celebratory of bisexuality and bi identities within education, not just kind of acknowledging, not just sort of like tolerating, but really like celebrating. And like, even if sort of some people in the room kind of don't get that or don't understand that, or it's not for them, fine, that's absolutely, but isn't it great that we have this kind of like spectrum of sexuality?
Yes, brilliant. Okay, we are moving on swiftly to questions from the audience. Do any of you have things you would like to ask? A gentleman in the front here who's been very helpful fact-checking us.
Hi, one of the reasons I know I'm old is that I got to see people have sex in reality long before I saw it on screen. And it is one of the changes. What I'd like to see is more intersectionality in the sex ed, partly the assumption that everybody you're talking to could be bisexual. But it's things based like, I learned loads about having good sex with women via having sex with men. I learned loads about boundaries via doing sex work.
I definitely feel that, I mean, all of the Tories and the transphobes are terrified that we're teaching their children how to have anal sex, but I think sex ed post-16 should include some description of how to safely do butt stuff, or you end up doing things like, a friend of mine was reading a Reddit post yesterday where a teenager had built a butt plug out of Lego and put it in his butt. And if we're not talking about sex ed in schools, that's the kind of thing which, anal sex in schools, that's the kind of thing which
Or
happens.
using your mother's toothbrush. But it's a thing in my line of work as well, is that it's a big selling point, is that can you do anal? I mean, DMI, I don't, but like with other people, it's like, I almost feel a little bit jealous of the money that I know that these girls will be raking in from the fact that they can do anal, but then it's like, but the reasoning behind that as well, it's like there's all these men just sort of think to themselves, oh, it's this desirable, this thing that we have to strive for is the anal,
Yeah.
I have vaginismus, so I've never had, by many people's definitions, I'm still a virgin because I've never had a penis in my vagina. But I have gone into quite a lot of research about whether, because a lot of people, when cis women tell their boyfriend, oh, I can't have vaginal sex, some of the boyfriends will shift, oh, let's have anal sex instead. And I've done quite a lot of research into, I think if you have vaginismus, anal sex will be just as painful for you as vaginal sex. It's the same muscles.
Right.
Oh my God.
I haven't had that. I haven't done any scientific research, but I'm sure in the next couple of years I'm going to be getting onto that. I don't know if we've answered your question, but that was it's fascinating that you saw people having sex in person before you saw porn. That is fascinating.
Actually, that's same for me. Actually, now that I think about it, because because like I said earlier, I was mainly consuming fan fiction, so I never actually watched video sex, I guess, like until after I'd actually had my first sexual experience.
Okay, show of hands in the room if you're comfortable. Who had sex first? Who saw people IRL having sex first? Who saw it on porn first?
Most people, yeah, 99% of the room.
Definitely a generational thing. Though I think the first time I didn't watch porn. I did see someone else's penis, but like they were video calling me so I could see their penis, and that was my first sexual experience. So,
oh gosh, okay.
like, oh no, very consensual.
Oh, very consensual.
I got to see his penis, their penis. Let's think. Unless Emma or Hugo have anything to add, there we'll move on to another question. Yeah. Can the mic go up to Lake next?
But you're right, there should be more, like, it's in terms of, like, seeing different types of bodies as well, in terms of, like, intersectionality. Thinking about the different skin tones, you know?
Yeah.
We should see that. We should see that in media.
Actually, on the point about porn, I just suddenly realized, like, the way bisexuality is presented in porn, like, in porn, it's like, all women are bisexual. And if you search, if you search like the word bisexual, like you'll actually come up with a lot of bisexual male porn, because like women are just assumed to be bisexual in porn. So yeah, we can have a conversation about the male gaze and whatever, but and how that ties into that. But yeah,
we could talk about this for ages.
Yes.
What's your question, Lake?
Sorry, just on that, there's actually a paper that came out really recently about the thing you were just talking about, Leanne. I cannot remember the name of it, but you can probably find it.
Okay.
Thank you for this incredible discussion. I wanted to ask all of you as sex educators, it feels like specifically in the UK, but also in the US right now, we're at this like moment where sex education is being dragged into the culture wars, possibly because it's like moving forwards and becoming more queer and intersectional. I would love to get your thoughts as educators on kind of how do we deal with that? How do we push back against it?
I'm going to turn to Emma first, who I'm hoping has some good advice.
So I guess we do deal with it in as many ways as we can. So we get this a lot. So in my professional work, we get this like a lot, like from legal cases to ridiculous things being published in the media to like parents phoning up and complaining about, like we get like a gauntlet of like challenges in different ways. And I find like the longer I do this work, like the more it kind of like spills out into like other areas of my life. So I have conversations with like colleagues in my other work, or like personal conversations, or even or like teachers in the room, or I guess like this kind of event, or like sometimes just strangers, like taxi drivers, or you know, I think it's about like finding and creating like opportunities to actually address it, because I think the problem at the moment is that the people this was we really felt this in the last couple of years of the kind of Tory government, and it doesn't actually seem like it's getting any better under this government. We really felt that like a very small, very conservative, very kind of sex negative, very like queerphobic, transphobic minority would just had such a big platform, and I think it's about kind of realizing actually a lot of us don't, like, even quite kind of like, I don't know, centre, like not particularly politically engaged parents, they don't actually, if you sit them down and ask them, like if you talk them through it, like it's not that we're going to show your children porn, but we're going to talk to them about it, because they're probably, as the research says, they're probably watching it already. Like, do you want us to do that? And like, we're not making your kids gay or bi or trans, but like, we know that a lot of people like aren't heterosexual, aren't cis, so do you want us to talk to your students about that, to your children about that? Like, even quite like conservative parents will be like, yes, of course I do. So I guess it's about like realizing there's a lot of us that don't see this narrative, which is actually getting a lot of like time and attention, and kind of like thinking about where in our lives we can push back against that and sort of like try and turn the tide. Like, I'm a big one for writing, like email writing when it seems a bit like hopeless. So I write a lot when like things come up in the news and they're like they're inaccurate or they're like not helpful, and I send like this email and you often get like a thing back saying, well, actually these are our guidelines. But I think it is worth, like, even if it feels difficult, it is worth challenging. It is yeah. And I think sometimes that pushback is because we're having an effect. So yeah, just finding opportunities to do that. Yeah.
And I also, like Leanne earlier mentioned, the people who are like, you shouldn't be slutty because you're giving bisexual a bad name. I also have felt personally like, should I be less queer and trans and provocative in ways which are going to make this cause harder? But I don't think that's the right thing to do. Obviously not if you're working in schools with children, but like, it is okay that trans people and queer people are also sex workers, or write and read audio porn, or like do any of those things. That doesn't mean that cis and straight people also do all of those things, and like it doesn't, giving up things that we enjoy and bring up like sexual pleasure that should not we shouldn't cede the things which we are fun about being queer or bi to the tiny minority of people who are being complete dicks right now. I don't usually use dick in a negative sense because I quite like dicks, but I think that's the best one.
I love dick.
Yes.
Do any of you have any more to add on that? Or do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, maybe that builds a little bit on what Leanne brought. But we'd like to talk about the silent majority. The overwhelming majority of parents want comprehensive sex ed in school because they often don't feel equipped to discuss sex with their kids, and they really appreciate when schools take this on. So, talking with parents and coalescing parents and bringing parents together on these issues and getting people like to write their representatives, to sign petitions, like you have very fertile ground. And even in the current climate, even if parents would be uncomfortable with one of their kids being queer, most parents would want their queer kid to still be supported in some way, and maybe by somebody else if they don't feel equipped to do it themselves either. And it's important to keep that in mind. The other thing, though, I'd say is that school curriculum at national levels, that's a big picture issue that it's really hard to get changes on. And you can figure out sometimes way of pushing for things more locally at your local school, depending on what kind of wiggle room that they have in the UK. But also looking into other organizations that work with youth to see what they can do in terms of progressive, comprehensive, queer, inclusive sex ed, or what local queer youth groups themselves are doing. Like, this is areas that it's a lot easier to get something on the go, and that you'll face a lot less pushback than trying to do something in schools at the national level.
I am increasingly feeling that the problem here is journalism and the media as much as it is what parents actually think. And that means it's my job, also yours, so that's great. I think, I can see your hand up. We had a hand up over here first, so if you can go up to there, please. And I also think we don't have that long for questions left, but if you have questions afterwards, we will all still be here.
Yes.
Hi, I'm going to keep it really quick and brief. As a follow-on to that, firstly, what about the parents that don't want their children to be educated, especially if they're very, right-wing Christian conservative? And the second thing, I run a men's mental health group, and I get young boys as young as like 17 scared to take a postgrad exam, and some that are too scared to tell their parents about being bisexual or multisexual or queer. The second part is, how do we bridge that gap to make boys feel accepted and loved for who they are?
Big questions.
Does anyone want to tackle the first one while I think about my answer to the second one?
Yeah, I'll answer part of the first one. Like, I think, I think a lot of parents, particularly kind of more conservative parents, like, there's this very, they have this model of parenthood that seems kind of very, like, siloed, and I do think that is, like, a somewhat colonial thing, like where, all families are like in little individual units rather than, like the village and raising children community and whatever. And I do think that, like, sometimes parents are wrong, and I think sometimes parents shouldn't have as much control over like what information they think their kids should be exposed to than they think they do, and I think that is on the risk. That's why we have standardized curriculums and teachers and the training that they get and whatever. It's and there's so many statistics on homeschooling and what effects that has and whatever. So I just I don't think it's. I don't think it's their business, really. If they don't want their kid to have that content promoted to them, or whatever my own parents have said to me. Sometimes it's more about kind of the common good, and also a lot of the time these parents are worried about loss of innocence, or people being exposed to things that might scare them or whatever, and it's very likely, as we've already established on this panel, a lot of that is happening already, and their parents probably think that their kid haven't been exposed because they haven't felt safe to tell them about that. I don't think it's their right to kind of police that, actually. And they don't have the training.
I also think that at the point where you're having people pulled out of classes because they're at their sex ed class at their parent request, a lot of people, if you know all of your friends have had a sex ed class but you weren't in, I think a lot of children would be please share what you learned in it. I think, I'm not saying responsibility should fall to young people, but I also think that we know they are getting more information than many of their parents want them to already. Yeah. And I think the more we can push a progressive curriculum and have these difficult conversations, like Emma was saying, we will get more of that good sex education will get through to them before other things do. Yeah. And I think parents will always try and stop children from accessing information which they think they shouldn't, but that parents are very bad at doing that. And I'm not going to go into a personal story there, but and in terms of boys, but particularly, I think we are still living in a culture which is massively influenced by the AIDS crisis and by Section 28, and you have a huge amount of things, not only just around, especially talking about prostate exams, that is so linked to the idea that that butt stuff is gay, and when I do butt stuff, it's very gay, but that's because I'm gay. And if a straight guy wants to do any kind of butt stuff, that doesn't, I'm assuming that, unless he feels like it may change his experience, that doesn't make him gay. I think...
Looking after your health is not gay.
Yes. Having sex in a safe way is not gay.
It's not gay.
I don't think we have any easy answers here, though I'm going to throw to Hugo in case he has the magical answer to this question.
I would say just children are just naturally curious, just in general. And so, it's not even about progressive sex ed or whatever. It's not even political. At this point, it's just about providing realistic sex education for the times that we live in, for the technology that children have access to now, the way social media is being run, it's, I'm not, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that it's not great that children are being exposed to porn at 11 years old, but it's happening, so what are we going to do about it, it's not even about politics, it's just it's already happening, that's out of our control, what are we going to do?
Yeah. And I was saying this to the others earlier, but if people weren't exposed to porn for the first time at 11 years old on Pornhub, which is often pirated, people are not getting paid properly, there's also a lot of BDSM content which does not involve the consent and negotiation required for that. If they were being exposed to, for example, ethical porn, where A, people are getting paid fairly, there's a lot less exploitation, but B, pretty much every time I sit down and watch a really good porn scene, I have they've 30 seconds of the people who are about to do it discussing what they're about to do and talking over limits and boundaries, even reminding each other of their safe words. If that was the porn people were being exposed to at 11, still not ideal, but a lot better than a clip on Pornhub, which is going to give a huge amount of horrible ideas about what sex should look like. Yeah. We are now officially at the end of the panel. If anyone has anything burning to say, this is your time.
Yeah, I'm not going to go over the whole sex ed in school thing because I think people have addressed it, but about making bisexual boys feel supported. It can be as simple as having a pin that says bisexual boys matter. But also, there's often this idea when you're an adult bisexual that somehow your sexuality is about sex, that bisexual is about sex, but your life story as a bisexual person, it's about your journey into the world. It's about figuring out who you are. This is about how you respond and you face the messages other people are putting outside with you. It's about figuring yourself out. And in a world that in a lot of ways has hostilities toward you. And these stories, they're not necessarily about your sex life. They're about your coming into your own as a person. And these are stories that are very relevant to put out there for younger people to hear.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to leave on that note.
Can we just do our handles and stuff?
Oh yeah, that's a really great idea. So please follow these, check out these amazing people's work. Emma, where can people find you?
So I'm Emma Belchan on most networks, and I work for the School of Sexuality Education, which is School of Sex Ed.
Brilliant. Joni, where can people find you?
I'm not on social media. You can, I know, sorry. But you can, you might just see me on TV at some point.
No.
We love that. Hugo, where can people find you?
Yeah, sexedforbyguys.com and at sexedforbyguys on Twitter. And but I'm more active on Mastodon, but the address to that is on the website.
Excellent. Also, I love how we've just all accepted that the only form of dead naming which is okay is still calling Twitter Twitter.
Yes.
Leanne, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on all social media, but especially Instagram at Polyphilia Blog. That's POLYPHILIABLOG. Also, just wanted to quickly say that if you go on to my Instagram and like the link in my bio, you can vote. Today is the last day that you can vote for me as this year's UK Sex and Relationships Creator of the Year. Thank you. I'm very, very excited. It's a pretty major award. And yeah, today's the last day you can vote. So if you can go to my Instagram and vote for me, it'll take you 30 seconds. Find me on page 4. And yeah, literally just add your email and vote for me on page 4. Thank you.
Awesome. And I am Quinn. You can find me at on Quinn Street on Instagram, or my newsletter, which is the most safe for work place I am on the internet, is at genderbent.co.uk. And I've been asked to tell you all that although this panel has finished, unfortunately, we could talk for hours, there are still events happening, music happening, I think, in the main hall downstairs. So after you've done here, after any bonus questions you have for us, please head down and enjoy the rest of this amazing Bi Pride Day and celebrate your bisexuality. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you to you.